Yeah, no worries.
So we're going to talk today about the work group Next Prioritization and John's team that has already started doing some of the things that we're talking about in the working group from an engineering manager perspective. So John, to start, what dashboards do you use and how does it show what MRs are in what categories, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. So I use this, which is our team page, our team metrics page, I guess.
Can you make that
Um,
font a little bigger, John?
yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you.
So you can see, like for this project in particular, I used this dashboard, which I think Mac put together. And you can see the trends. So about the time we started this, we had about 30% undefined. That is MRs that had no type label. And we're currently at we're currently at 0, I think. And the reason, so we're addressing this on a team basis, which means my direct reports, but they're not the only ones who submit MRs to the product planning group. So it was non-zero for a while there, 3%, but I think you can see here in the current month it's now 0.
And
And
was
yeah,
it
that's,
were you the DRI on making sure they all got a label? All the MRs got a label if they were undefined?
I mean, pretty much, but there wasn't much for me to do once I communicated this out amongst the team. They handled it pretty much themselves.
Were there any
It's,
disagreements on, is this one really bug or is this one maintenance, for example, or is this really maintenance or feature? Were there many discussions like that, or did that not
I
happen?
mean, like, not many discussions surfaced, but I mean, the key thing is that, like, you don't have to put a sub label on. It can just be the top level type label. So, like, you know, like there won't be a bug type for every single type of bug, or a maintenance type for every single type of maintenance issue.
Mhm.
And that's okay. The main thing is to get the top level type on, I believe.
Makes it, and it looks like at the bottom there, you have the undefined merge requests as part of the dashboard. So you could
That's
click on
pretty
those
much, yeah.
to,
So that's pretty much how we cleared up. So I was able to go through this is really useful. So I was able to go through these and kind of attach type labels to undefined ones. And after that, like, you would get an idea for the type of merge request that would result. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might be, say, for example, people might have a tendency to leave it off of, say, feature flag rollout MRs, for example.
Mhm.
So you can address that directly then. But I can't remember any off the top of my head that were themes like that. There were definitely some, and I can dig that data out. But to be honest, once I gave the resources to the team, we put it on our team page, discussed it in our team call. I left one-to-one agenda items, so all the classics basically. This number went down pretty quickly.
In hindsight, I should have actually invited the product manager you work with to this, which I didn't. Because I'd love their impressions too. So with currently what you're doing with the process, are are is the product manager prioritizing bugs, features, and maintenance, or is it because that's often what product managers did in the past? Or is it that product managers have been doing features, you've been doing maintenance, and the quality team's been doing bugs, in conjunction with whichever with the other portions of the team, including UX. So who's been doing the prioritization so far for your team?
Okay, cool. So without getting too much into it, like, so RPM will be the DRI for making the decision. But typically during the milestone planning, I'll suggest quality items or bug security items. We have a bug security backlog of practically 0 at this point, which is great. But for other items, I'll suggest them, and 9 times out of 10, with good reasoning, they're put into the milestone. One small thing on the quality thing is that I'm trying to get the team to the point where we prioritize recent quality things. In the context of this is that we want to leave, we consider time to be important, so we want to leave technical debt in the code base for as short a period as possible, and preferably not switch context. So if we complete a feature in one milestone and we have some tech debt cleanup to do, even if it's relatively low, impact or severity, we want to follow that immediately in the next milestone and clean that up. That makes sense. So, and I have to say, like, we're pretty aligned on that, myself and Melissa, our PM.
Great. And are you getting any, I know Mech's team is also planning some automation to create issues, to note things. I don't know how much of that is live yet. Have you seen any of that yet, or not just yet? So for example, you might get an issue saying you have this number, here are your undefined merge requests, or things like that. So have you seen any of that yet, or not just yet?
Specifically for this project, no. But I could imagine that would be set up pretty easily in triage ops.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what that's what the plan is. Similar to what we have like for error budgets. Like if the team is over on error budgets, it
right.
tags the team to say you're over on error budgets, and here's why, and here's the issues.
Yeah, sure.
The others. So is that top right one? Is that over the last 30 days, or is that all time?
The top right one, I believe, is the current month. So from the first of the month, I guess it would be.
So we've got a full month, almost a full month's worth of data. So you're at about 50% maintenance and about 40% features. And well, I'm rounding too much, but 47% maintenance, 36% features, and 17% bug. The goal, the working group currently is saying, leaning towards that the ratios over time across all teams, not on a per team basis necessarily, should converge on 60% features, 30% maintenance, and 10% bugs. So, your last 30 days, you've been at about 17% bugs. That's pretty close. Maintenance and features are kind of inverted. Like we would, the goal is to have a bit more on features to, and a bit less on maintenance. Again, this is just long-term trends, not, looking at last 30 days. So let's say you had that as a goal, which you don't currently. 60%, features, 30% maintenance. Would you have made, do you think you and the product manager and quality and UX would have made any different decisions to get there? Or would you say, well, that's great that we have these goals, but for my team right now, it makes sense to have, 47% maintenance, 36% features. Just curious about what your thoughts are on that. And but if you don't have anything else to share, this is great. I want to remove the share so we can see each other.
Yeah, sure. Well, while I have it open, I'll just one more thing. So you can see the trend here was for a lot more maintenance, and we're now doing a lot more features relative to the amount of maintenance that we're doing. And there is some method behind this, and it's deliberate in some ways. Like so we recently had an RCA into why we're trying to clean up. We're trying to be mindful of this, right? Like, and of the things that we have in our backlog that are features that are maybe partially complete, and we want to know why there are partially complete but not released features in the backlog, because these cause us pain in the long run. Okay, like classic example would be a community contributor sees these features, tries to contribute, gets frustrated, or a member from another team comes in and tries to contribute something and gets tripped up by the fact the feature's not released. We then also have to switch context a lot. Like, is this feature released? Does it have a feature flag? How rolled out is the feature flag? What stage is it at? Where did we leave it before? Why did we leave it? Why didn't we finish? So we're consciously trying to get to the point where we're cleaning up existing issues in our backlog that are like that. And we're also not doing that in future. We're not abandoning things for whatever reason. We're trying to add a cost function to that. So if you want to abandon something because there's a bigger opportunity, there's a cost to abandoning that thing. So the way that relates to all this is that we may be slowly doing more features every month and less maintenance because we're getting on top of that stuff, right? And so it's not that I would aim for the metric per se. I just think the metric probably represents a healthy balance, and becoming more healthy will get us there, right, in the long run. And we're going down the road of trying to ship one major feature deliverable per month. Anything else is a bonus and a stretch goal, but we're going to focus on topping and tailing features so that they fit into the milestone cadence comfortably at about like 75%. The team can swarm on things. We get them out, and that has really been working for us.
That's
like
great.
2 months ago, we released epic links. This month, we'll release confidential notes. Hopefully next month, you'll be able to parent issues, right? So just like you can parent epics. So we're getting these complex things out every month, and it's really working. And that's probably why you see that trend.
That's great. Sam, you have a great question you put in chat. Why don't you verbalize it?
Yeah. So I was thinking the high amount of maintenance might be partially due to the fact that we haven't been prioritizing maintenance tasks as much, and then there's just more maintenance to do once it has like a way to flow in.
Definitely the trend that came in before Christmas was where we as an organization, I think, consciously focused on maintenance, i.e. reliability more. It's possible, Sam, I have another, I wouldn't say it's a theory because it's borne out in data that I've seen. It's anecdotal, but nonetheless. One of the costs of iteration is that you don't do everything you would like to do in the first iteration. You do what gives the most user value for the least, if you like, expense, right? So, and one of the things that happens when you do that, in my opinion, is that you then get bug or maintenance requests that say this feature doesn't do this, it should do this, and therefore I'm going to submit this bug. But when you make a conscious choice not to include that functionality, it's not a bug. It's a part of the iteration. And when that customer asks for that thing, it's not a bug, it's a feature request, in my opinion, because you've consciously made the decision. When the system doesn't act the way you designed it to act, that's a bug. But when you design the system to act that way, it's not a bug. And the same thing with maintenance as well. So I would even, now that we've kind of got undefined down to 0, I will most likely to focus on making sure that the labels we are applying are accurate, and that if something is, let's, for want of a better phrase, like a victim of iteration and should be a feature, labeled a feature, but it's labeled a bug or maintenance, then I would want to make sure that we're labeling it correctly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like to build a weird analogy, like if you build a car and you didn't want it to fly, but the customer's like, why doesn't this fly? The fact that the car doesn't fly should be a bug. Yeah.
Yeah, or a good one at the minute is that, like, in order to get confidential notes out in a very safe way to the customer, i.e. they don't leak anywhere, the system's easy to reason about, we're not going to put them on MRs, just on issues and epics to begin with. We need a use case, a solid use case to put them on MRs because it adds complexity, right? So we put it out on issues and epics, and then perhaps we get a bug report that says the button doesn't exist on comments on MRs. Like, well, yeah, but it's not a bug, right? It's a feature request because we decided deliberately to put that constraint on the system. So it's not the system acting in a way we didn't expect it to. It's actually acting exactly as we designed it. So yeah, that's just to put it in the GitLab context. I know it's abstract because we haven't released that feature yet, but it's the one that's top of mind for me at the minute.
So I have a question. I'm wondering,
I was going to ask you, from your
and
perspective as a front end, as an engineering manager of a different team, what your thoughts were on this.
yeah,
Overall.
well, it's
the
interesting.
whole working group and these dashboards.
Sure. Well, to that subject we're talking about, that exact subject came up just this week. Someone was explaining, no, there's an extension of a feature, but a request came in, it was marked as a bug, it was being treated as a bug, but in fact was not a bug because it was just something that wasn't designed or built yet. I'm wondering, so let's just say those issues come in as a bug, and I know we have a process to assign severity priority labels to bugs. Is that at that stage, or do you have another process that you follow to revisit the type label, the categorization? How do you do that to make sure, like, oh no, this isn't a bug, we're going to switch it over to maintenance or feature even?
Is that directed at me now?
It is, John. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I just bring it up directly with the PM. I mean, I assume that they're the. I usually look for some validation, to be honest, from the PM that I'm not like.
Mhm.
As we go to the point where we shouldn't leave 6 months between when we work on features, like it will be more obvious. But sometimes we'll go from working on epics to working on roadmaps, and then 6 months later come back in epics, and I'll say like, didn't we? I'll look for validation from the PM. Didn't we decide not to include this? And if that's the case, I'll just change the type label during triage. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds great. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of the hygiene aspect of this process, is that categorization, making sure it's accurate, because we're really looking for good data to lead us in a new direction. And if that data is inaccurate, it's not going to be any more helpful.
The plan is good stuff. Today, product management is the DRI on everything that development develops. So both features, maintenance, and bugs. And the goal of this working group is that product management focuses on features, prioritization, in conjunction with the quad team, which is product management, development, UX, and quality. But then the big change is that the engineering managers will be the DRI in conjunction with the quad and their own team, of course, on maintenance. And that quality will be the DRI on bugs, although bugs should be a little bit easier to prioritize because they should be based on severity, which we already have that. So we're not doing that yet, especially on the maintenance side being prioritized by engineering managers being the DRI. I don't know, John and Neil, what do you think of as that changes, that you'll then have that responsibility? Are you looking forward to that? Are you concerned about that? A bit of both? What do you think?
So I'm encouraged for sure to have more of that ownership and especially even accountability. I think it's something we've largely been doing, but this framework paints that picture and it makes it a standard across the company. I'm really looking forward to that. The dashboard that John was walking us through, my PM and myself yesterday were experimenting with that. We have an MR in place to get that on our handbook page as well, because the quicker we can start evaluating this data, the quicker we can start realizing what our direction looks like in terms of advocating for maintenance from a development engineering manager side of things. It's going to be a habit change, because I think there's been a lot of that, especially on front end, as the reliability was mentioned earlier. Those initiatives have been going on for a long time now. So we're scraping for work. We're trying to find good, valid work to do. Not a lot of that is feature work. So it's kind of already been a habit formed. And I think we actually need to form a different habit. Like, what's more effective maintenance work? Not just stuff our team wants to do, but stuff that's actually going into like the really good bucket of maintenance work. And making sure that's all like high priority across the board. All product types is urgent, somewhat urgent, high priority, very meaningful types of work, not just because we are lacking backend support.
What do you think, John? Thanks, Neil.
Yeah.
What do you think, John?
Yeah, I can pretty much agree with that. Like I feel responsible for quality anyway as an EM. So and something Neil said there, like kind of made me think of, like, we have two options as an EM. You have the small. I'll give you a concrete example. We're looking at error budgets at the minute and things that contribute to error budgets. And one of the things on plan is an endpoint called real-time changes. This is pulled every 3 seconds you're on an issue, right? It creates a lot of noise, but it's a long polling system. And when that is slow, even if it's slow for a tiny number of times, it really hits our error budget because it's hit so many times. Now, we can make that faster, and that's one level of complexity, right? It's a low level of complexity to work on that. But what would really help with that would be to move that completely to WebSockets, which is something that we could do because we have a WebSocket on that page. And that's a much higher complexity thing. And that would get rid of that endpoint entirely. So it's often not as simple as, somebody somewhere has to make that call, right? Do you take the higher complexity thing for that? Is the payoff worth it? No, I think that responsibility lies with the EM anyway. and it's up to them to advise the PM on a call like that. And honestly, like maybe it's just because we're the plan team and we build planning tools, right? But our EMs are really focused on quality as well. I've noticed that. So I've never had a problem getting anything I felt strongly about scheduled for a milestone, you know. But I'm happy enough to be the DRI. I feel like we do it anyway.
Great. So I'm going to spring something on Neil. As I went into the dashboard and I filtered it to thread insights. Let me share my screen. I'm just curious, like this will be the first impression, you know, no tuning whatsoever. Let's see what you think. And I know you have half of thread insights and Tiago has the other half. But let me share my screen. And because your first impressions will be the first impressions that every engineering manager will have. So I'm interested in that. And this is if I did it correctly. So this is, so thread insights, let's see here, in the last month, been about 50% maintenance and 30% features, kind of similar to, and 10% bug, kind of similar to John's team. 15% undefined. John is a little lower, but that's because he's been focusing on it, and no, you know, no other teams have been asked to in a big way. It's interesting is that features jumped up quite a bit recently. You can see this green line went up. And let's see, one way to look at this is, so there's features gone up quite a bit since January. If I look at maintenance, somewhat stable, but gone down a bit, probably because we're focusing more on features. Bugs, gone stable-ish, but gone down a bit. And if I look at undefined, used to be quite a bit, you know, back in May, but, you know, now is in the 10% range. If I scroll down on the undefined, you know, there's some to define here, but another way to look at it is in the last 30 days, it's been more on maintenance than on features. And we want to, over time, we want to flip that where it's, you know, around 60% on features and 30% on maintenance. And keeping it around 10% bug. And it might be like that undefined, maybe a lot of them are features, maybe not, I don't know, but let's just say they were all features, you know, then maintenance and features would be a bit more balanced. Or maybe it's all on maintenance, or too high on maintenance. Not sure, but what are your, that's like just first look, no warning, I was gonna spring this on you, but
so
what are your first impressions of this?
I mean, like I mentioned, we walked through this week, my PM and myself.
Oh, you did.
First
okay,
thing
so
that stood, but I can retrospect on my my feelings from yesterday. First thing I noticed was the undefined was surprising that we did have uncategorized work. What I noticed is I have an engineer who's quite active in the UI space, so GitLab UI specifically, working on a lot of those components that we offer as a standard offering across the team. Those aren't being tracked. Once they become tracked, they're going to be aligned with our group. Well, they already aligned with our group, but then they're going to go in one of these type buckets. That's going to impact our percentages.
That are not marked as thread insights that will be.
They're marked as thread insights, but they're not typed. They don't have that category.
Okay.
And once they have a category, one of these pie slices is going to grow. And I'm not sure it's going to be the one we want. And I think we're going to have to manage that is my thought, because that's capacity, it's allocation within our team that we're going to have to manage that probably wasn't extremely visible until now. So I think that's where this data is really going to be powerful. It's like, oh, wow, no, we need to closely manage this because we have expectations at a company that teams are aligning to these percentages that we've set aside or set up. So I'm interested to see that. I think what that's going to mean, we're just going to have to closer manage some of these team members that are a bit more active outside of our group, but the work they do should still be categorized, you know, within thread insights in this example. In terms of it's a really interesting period because thread insights as a team has been largely impacted by the reliability initiatives. So I started closely working with this team back in October. So it's only been about 6 months now. For the first half of that, nearly every backend engineer was focused on reliability things. We didn't have a lot of feature work at all. So I might actually disagree with some of that feature work. We may have just been mistyping things. More recently, and you saw from that line chart, we did have some really big projects start in December, early January. And that's absolutely what I would expect, is we had a lot of MRs that were the product of 2, if not 3 projects that kind of span multiple milestones that contributed to a lot of new feature development. And so that's great. What I don't understand is how our features have gone down since. So yesterday we were talking about that pie chart, and that month view is great, but it's very time based. Like in 5 days, whatever it is, May 1st. So Monday next week, that pie chart's going to be useless for a period of time. So what we actually did is we cloned this dashboard and we created a quarterly view to get more of an average view. And I guess that's what I'm looking at is, so our quarter in this, unfortunately, it's not the calendar, it's a calendar quarter and it's last quarter. So I don't think it includes, I'm not exactly sure which 3 months it includes, but we went down from 45% features to 29% features, which I find interesting.
Which also in Thread Insights is not, in some ways is not surprising, because I know we've had a backlog of maintenance work we wanted to do for quite a while to improve reliability and performance. I think it's more on Tiago's team than yours that's been the case, but I know in some ways spending more on maintenance in Thread Insights is expected. It's not what we want long term, but it's not surprising based on where we're at today and what our priorities are.
Definitely. I think, and yeah, while we were talking, I reminded myself about the feature versus maintenance types. The maintenance is non-bug work that doesn't have any user and facing changes. So like John talked about feature flag cleanup, that falls into that category. We're doing a lot of migrations to GraphQL currently. That's not going to impact the user. They're not going to notice any difference. Performance, we could consider that user facing possibly, but probably not. So it probably still falls into that maintenance. So you're absolutely right, Wayne. We're going to continue to see a lot of maintenance style work, even though it's very valid and goes into that whole user experience.
Okay. John, I know you have to, we're over on time and you have to run soon. Any other final comments before you drop?
Yeah, just a quick one. It's a straight count of MRs. So, you know, maintenance MRs that consist of flipping a feature flag to on by default are extremely quick to write and very short and very easy to review. Feature MRs on our part, on the other hand, can often involve a tricky migration, something like that requires 4 rounds of review, so 2 from backend and 2 from database as well. So there may be something in that the complexity of the MRs, if that was added as, you know, some, instead of a straight up count, you know, if you took the complexity into consideration for exactly how much developer time or effort was spent, you know, these numbers might be somewhat different. So I don't know.
Cool. Thanks, John. Well, thanks, John and Neil and Sam for just kind of walking through this and giving some first, not first impressions for John, but sharing John's experience with this and getting some early impressions from Neil and Sam on this from an engineering perspective. So great stuff.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, John and Sam.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.